I'm going to tell you a little story about my life. And I'm going to give a disclaimer here for anybody out here who happens to be in law enforcement, because I know some of you are. Some of the things that I'm going to say today are not designed to be anti-law enforcement in any way. I want that to be crystal clear. But some of the things that I'm going to say today are going to be exposing some of the people that are corrupt, that are not good, that do not adhere to the values of true law-abiding, constitutional enforcing law enforcement. That will happen today. And I use that as an illustration of things that, God forbid, should potentially happen in the future here. In 1996, I was 17 years old. I was a junior in high school. And I took a trip to Phoenix, Arizona. It's warmer there than it is today. After a couple of days of being poked, prodded about my physicality, mentally, even psychologically, they herded me into a little room with a couple of other people. And some of you might remember something similar to this. They asked me to put my right hand up. So I did. And I said, I, Casey Hendrickson, do solemnly swear and affirm that I will support and defend the United States Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And that it's been a while, I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. And I about broke down and cried along with a couple of other people in that room. I'm a junior in high school, and I go back and I have to finish my junior year before I go to basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And when you say that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that is not a terroristic threat. That is an oath of a United States soldier. That is an oath that many people here have taken, that many of you will take one day. And for that, we are put on terrorist watch lists. We are labeled agitators. And they make laws to come and disarm us because we have been trained. That's one of the fears that many of us have today. A lot of people ask me, Casey, where do you see the gun control debate going? Is it an assault weapons ban like Dianne Feinstein? I actually don't see that. Yeah, I know it was defeated. It's going to come up again. Rest assured. Especially after the midterm elections. No, I see something happening that we see happening in European countries. Oh, you got the Second Amendment. Sure, you can own a gun. You just got to lock it up in a sports club. You can't take it home. See, they do this in Europe. They do this in Australia. You can own a gun. You can't take it home. So your rights haven't been infringed at all because, like Amendment says, you got a right to bear arms. Sure, you do. Between 9 to 5 with a membership fee, but it's right here for you. That becomes my greatest concern. Isn't it interesting that you got gentlemen back there, they've got these aggressively styled hunting rifles that they like to call assault rifles, right? Same mechanism, same caliber as a hunting rifle I got at home. Same firing rate. They don't care about my hunting rifle. It's the same darn thing, isn't it? They care about those. Now, why do you think that is? It's just cosmetic. Some of the weapons that aren't on the bans list, you can put them on a new chassis, new stock, turn them into bullpups. Guess what? They're banned, just like that. Same exact weapon, same firing mechanism, same caliber, everything. If this were about safety, they wouldn't be talking about modern sporting rifles or aggressively styled hunting rifles, however you want to call them. They wouldn't be talking about AR-15s, AK-47s, because you're more likely to be shot with a shotgun than any rifle, and you're more likely to be shot and killed in a homicide with a hunting rifle than any of these modern sporting rifles. And of course, we all know you're more likely to be shot and murdered by a bad guy with a handgun than any of these things. So why do they care so much about these? And then we have to look around, and we've got to look at some of the things that this president said when he was a senator. I'm going to take you back to July 2nd of 2008, Senator Obama. He's then a candidate. We cannot continue to rely on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we have set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, and just as well funded. It's July 2nd, 2008, Colorado Springs, Colorado. It's kind of funny, I was reading some of the anti-constitutional blogs the other day, they said that never happened. It's on his official YouTube channel. It's 15 minutes into his speech. So then we look around and we go, hey, why is DHS purchasing so much ammo? Why is it that LEtargets.com, which makes targets for federal agencies, why is it that they said they were commissioned by a federal agency to come up with targets for the range that have innocent children, grandma in a bathrobe, and normal-looking individuals protecting their siblings? Not bad guys in masks. Not the Taliban, not Al-Qaeda, not anybody else like that. You, me, and your children on these targets. Why did a federal agency commission them? They called it No More Hesitation. That was the name of the product. Now, they've since removed them, and they've apologized. But on their website at LEtargets.com, you can still see the letter. We were commissioned by a federal agency for these targets. So a federal agency went to them. I'm assuming DHS, but I don't know for sure. We got the President of the United States running out there and saying, hey, weapons of war don't belong on the street, as he flies drones over our heads, purchases enough ammo to run the Iraq War for 24 years, gets armored personnel carriers, not just civilian variants that they give to SWAT folks. They're actually decommissioned from Iraq and Afghanistan. Why do they need it and not us? Some of you might know me from MNC, some of you might know me from WOWO, some of you might have seen me on television a couple of weeks ago. See, on television a couple of weeks ago, and I know this isn't South Bend, but this, trust me, is a part of it. South Bend got a new police chief. His name is Ron Teachman. He's from Massachusetts. We hadn't had a chance to talk with Ron Teachman yet about where he stood on the Second Amendment. I know Brad Rogers, Sheriff of Elkhart County. I know where he stands. I know where the Mishawaka Police Department stands. I know where many others stand. I know where 340 sheriffs around this country stand. And they stand with you and I. But I wanted to know where the new police chief in the community of South Bend stood. So I was invited to be on public television. Yeah, I knew I was getting into. 3-on-1. But the police chief, I had my suspicions. I just didn't know where he stood. And so while I'm listening to people talk about how psychotropic drugs have no effect on this, even though every mass shooting in the last 20 years that somebody's been on some form of medication like this. 2 weeks before, I lost a friend who would have never committed suicide because he started going on these things to treat an illness that he had. And I'm listening to them call for gun control. And I'm listening to the chief of police say one word over and over and over again. Unreasonable. Now, he didn't say it because of the gun control proposals. He didn't say it when I threw out the stats that a hunting rifle was more likely to be used in a murder. He didn't say it when I said shotguns more likely to be used in a murder than any rifle. He didn't say it when I said that handguns were more likely to be used. He didn't say it when I pointed out the fact that the Federal Bureau of Investigation said that you are 8.5 times more likely to smash somebody's head in with a hammer than to use a gun to do it. He didn't care about any of that. He said unreasonable every time I brought up the United States Constitution's Second Amendment and the Constitution of the state of Indiana. Every single time. And we aired that on my station the next day. And my listeners, people like you, went down to the Common Council meeting, they showed up, and I had a council member call me up and go, what on earth did you say on your show? So I didn't do anything, I just played audio from what this man said. He said a group of people came out there, and I'm quoting, and destroyed him. People like you who show up in the cold on your day off, you should probably be with your families, enjoying sports, comforts of home, a couple weeks, probably, hopefully, mowing the lawn. But they showed up because it was that important that day. And then the local television station, ABC 57, caught up with the new police chief. It's only been in town since January, by the way. And they said, hey, did they take anything out of context. Is there anything you want to clarify for the people out there? And he goes, I don't want to have a debate about this. At one point, when we were talking on television, I brought up the fact that internment wasn't more than a few decades ago. And I was listening to these three people who are telling us that there is no possibility of tyranny rising in the United States at all, and it's a pipe dream, and it's a conspiracy theory. And I'm reminding them of internment. I'm reminding them of the Irish, the Russians, the Jews, obviously blacks in this country, the Chinese, later internment with the Japanese, Native Americans. I'm reminding them of this history. And it is really funny. There's one thing that is pretty consistent with all of that, aside from government abuse, is that they weren't allowed to have any firearms. Oh, it's chilling. This is the word that the police chief used. This is just chilling to hear things like that. This is why we can't have a reasonable discussion. This tie, this tradition of being tied to the Second Amendment is why we can't have a reasonable discussion of gun control in this country. And I find it chilling that he would say that the American people have to arm themselves against the United States government. I interrupted and I said, yeah, I find it chilling too. But how naive and juvenile and short-sighted and ignorant is it for somebody to say that something that just happened in the 1940s can't happen again? And I said, Chief, I would hope that you would stand with sheriffs like Brad Rogers in Elkhart, the police department in Mishawaka, the two counties in rural Indiana that have signed legislation saying they will not enforce any federal gun control law because it is illegal. The 340 sheriffs around the country, the several states that have passed bills doing the same thing, the several counties around the country, dozens of them passing bills that say the same thing, said, I would hope that you, Chief, would also stand with the people. God forbid it ever came to that. And he snickered. We know where he stands. He doesn't stand with you. He doesn't stand with me. But these are the people that we're facing. And I often get asked a lot on the program, Casey, do you really think that this president is a dictator or a tyrant or anything else? I'll tell you what, it's an irrelevant question. You see, the Nazis did not have to pass gun control when they came to power. Weimar Republic already did it. When they came to power, gun control was already there waiting for them. You know what they did? They added a little adjustment that made sure that Jews couldn't have them. That's all they did. It's not about whether or not we think individuals right now are tyrants. And you may. But that's not what it's about. It's about them laying the foundation and the framework for tyranny to rise in the future. That's what we have to keep into perspective. That's what we have to think about. I went into that debate knowing I was going to be outnumbered 3-1 on public television. I went in there with a very specific strategy, and I'm going to talk about this because I think this is important. I did not want to be the angry guy. I didn't want to be the guy that was going to sit there and challenge them on every single point. I knew that some points that they were going to put out which were false, I was going to have to let go for the broader goal. And I did. And then I had something very interesting happen after the show. One of these guys who was brought there to oppose me looked at me, because I get emails, Casey, why didn't you throw the chair at the police chief? How did you keep your composure? It's hard. One of these guys that was there to oppose me leaned in and he goes, I wish everybody would argue your position the way that you did. You made me start thinking. Henry Davis Jr. is the common councilman in South Bend. He's a Democrat. Henry and I like each other, but we disagree on this issue. We've been fighting back and forth online for months about gun control. He wanted to call in that day because he and his family have been the victims of government abuse. It was a recent story. I won't bore you with the details. They didn't let him on. I took his call the next day on my show. He said, Casey, you and I have been fighting about this for months on Facebook. What you said on that show changed my mind. And it wasn't just what you said, it was how you said it. So the next time you get some idiot, nincompoop, small-minded puke, and I know that's going to run through your head, who's sitting there telling you that there is no threat. Why do you hate children so much? Why do you want to put bullets through their head? Why do you support mass shooters? Why are we endorsing people like these guys with rifles back there who just, I know you're just waiting to shoot all of us, I know. Why do you support people like that? I mean, they're wearing black, they must be bad guys, right? Think about it. Take a deep breath. Maintain your composure. Argue the facts. If you tell people it's not about safety, if it were about safety, they'd be talking about handguns. No, I don't endorse talking about handguns. But if it were about safety, they'd certainly be talking about the one that takes 6,000 lives, not the one that takes 58, right? But it's not about safety. We know it's not about safety. You just got to make that point to people. Zero tolerance. Oh boy, have we had some interesting stories about zero tolerance in our schools lately, haven't we? Sorry, I tried to find a Pop-Tart on my way over here today. I was going to pull it out. Some of you saw this picture. This kid from New Jersey, he's holding a .22 rifle, which is styled to look like an AR-15. I know Dianne Feinstein doesn't know the difference between a .22 and a .223 and a .556 or a .76. I know that. They don't know the difference between a .40 caliber and a 40-ounce beer. We know that. This kid is simply posing with this rifle. He's 11 years old. Dad did the right thing, taught him how to use the thing, right? That's what we want. That prevents accidents. And it also leaves that 14-year-old boy who just defended his siblings from that guy who broke into their house when he took out the bad guy, when mom and dad aren't home. Of course, they don't tell us those stories, do they? They don't air the interviews before local government and Congress of the parents of the Sandy Hook victims that oppose gun control. They don't ever tell us about them, do they? Instead, they splice audio together, they cut things out of video, and they make it seem like something that didn't happen. So this kid, he poses with it. Dad proudly posted on Facebook, no harm, no foul, no big deal. He's legally allowed to do it. Child Protective Services with law enforcement shows up at their home the next day, demanding access to the safe where the guns are being held, in order to log their serial numbers and make sure that they are properly, quote, properly registered. There is no gun registration in New Jersey. I talk about a story that happened in my old hometown of Las Vegas very frequently. And the reason I tell this story is because we had a situation on the Purdue campus in Indianapolis last week. Some girl saw some guy with a musical instrument pulling it out of his trunk, and then she ducked for cover because she swears up and down she saw a rifle or a shotgun. 5 agencies get involved in a manhunt for 4.5 hours. The next day, we end up learning from law enforcement she didn't ever see a gun. She just saw something and called the authorities. Now, many of us right now are thinking, hey, she was spooked. Media's going to play a part in that. She thought she saw something. She called the authorities. Okay? How sad is it that she feels that threatened? There's a Costco in Summerlin, which is a suburb of Las Vegas, Nevada. A couple of years ago, this is where I was doing my show at the time. In Nevada, you have a CCW. Everybody can open carry, but to conceal it, you got to get a CCW. This man had one. He's in Costco, he's shopping, he's minding his own business. He's lifting up, reaching up to pick something off of the aisle. Some chick happens to see he's carrying a weapon. Legally. No signs posted whatsoever. They don't carry the force of the law in Nevada anyway. No signs posted whatsoever that no guns were allowed. She complains. Management comes up to him and says, hey, got some people complaining about your gun. He's like, well, how did she see it? Well, I guess you're reaching up and she saw it. He's like, well, I apologize. You all know when you go to a Costco or Sam's Club, you're there for like 2-3 hours, right? The guy's not leaving. He's got a full cart. He goes, look, I promise next time I come back, I apologize, I won't bring it in. I'm going to respect your property rights. Manager leaves him alone. Manager calls the police department. Says the man is trespassing and refusing to leave and he's armed. He's being belligerent. This guy who broke absolutely no law whatsoever is walking out of the store with his wife. 3 officers are there, one's controlling the crowd, 2 officers rush him with their weapons already drawn, tell him to drop his weapon. He has not drawn his weapon from his hip. Witnesses attested to this. The 3rd police officer testified to this. Drop your weapon. Obviously shocked, deer in the headlight, stopped, reaches down. Just like this, weapon is still in the holster. They shoot him dead. This man broke absolutely no law. 0. Just like this girl at the Purdue campus in Indianapolis broke no law. When you have people who are ignorant of these things, and they call law enforcement, and law enforcement is being told a story which oftentimes is not true. They arrived on that scene assuming that this guy was a threat because of what the manager at this Costco told them. This man lost his life. 3 police officers there, 2 officers killed him in front of his family for obeying their orders. 3rd officer testifies against them in a coroner's inquest. It is ruled justified. 2 months later, keep in mind that I understand the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is very different than anything I've ever encountered here in Indiana. They are a paramilitary force. Not one time in the history of that police department has there ever been a police shooting ruled unjustified or unexcusable. Never. Not one time. They execute a warrant on the wrong house for drugs. They kick in a door, shoot a man dead. Guy's on the toilet. Unarmed, no drugs. Innocent man. Shooting was ruled excused. There is no civilian trial. None. 2007, Minneapolis, Minnesota. SWAT team. You guys have heard of no-knock raids, right? For those of you who don't know, a no-knock raid is where you don't knock on the door and say, hey, police, we're executing a search warrant, come open the door. No-knock raid is police search warrant and the door is kicked in and they immediately raid. We're told that it is necessary to prevent the destruction of evidence. But there's a downside. Minneapolis, Minnesota, 2007. SWAT team, middle of the night. Family is watching a movie in bed. 3 children, 2 adults. SWAT team breaks through the windows, kicks in the doors, not once ever identifying themselves. The man of the house grabs his shotgun, thinking people are breaking into his home. He fires a warning shot with a verbal warning through his door. As Vice President Biden would say to you, by the way. 22 bullets are fired back at him and his children. No identification of who these people are. None. It's one of the children that happened to notice a badge through the bullet holes in the door. That is the police. It's the police. He immediately drops his shotgun and surrenders. The next day, the head of the police department is all on the news, hugging the children, apologizing. We are so sorry. This is an awful mistake. And mistakes happen. Sometimes they get the wrong house. I think we can all appreciate that. These men never identified themselves as law enforcement before entering the home. They never identified them as law enforcement after the warning shot was fired. They went into that home and fired 22 bullets at this man's 3 children and his wife. Now, it was good that he apologized. He did it very publicly. That's great. Imagine my horror when 3 weeks later I see that he has awarded this very same SWAT team commendation medals for bravery because of this instance in their duty. The reason that he gave was that they didn't retreat. They kept shooting at innocent people. That's commendable. They didn't identify themselves. Oh, by the way, their SWAT team, they fired 22 bullets, didn't hit anybody. Unfortunately, if we spend time on YouTube, we see stories like that. After I had my little encounter, if you will, with the new police chief of South Bend, I took a phone call from Sheriff Brad Rogers in Elkhart. He said, man, it's funny, because he was on CNN recently. He said, it's funny. They always make it 3-on-1, don't they? I said, but I support you. I took calls from officers in the South Bend Police Department under this man. Casey did a great job. We don't stand with this guy. I took phone calls and emails from the Mishawaka Police Department. You did a great job. We can't believe South Bend hired this guy. You need to understand that, yes, there's some bad apples in federal agencies, in law enforcement, but there is an awful lot of good ones. And when we talk about what they are willing to do for their citizens, I think it is important. Anybody here familiar with Sheriff Brad Rogers at all in Elkhart? A couple? He is an oath keeper. In fact, if you guys haven't heard of the Oath Keepers, I suggest you seek them out. The Oath Keepers are a group of former and current military and law enforcement personnel that have sworn to uphold our constitutional rights. They will not enforce illegal orders. Now, Sheriff Brad Rogers in Elkhart has sworn to do that on the Second Amendment and others. You know what he did this last week? There's some people in his community that they're going to have their water shut off by the government because the government wants them to get water from a different source. Brad Rogers doing what Brad Rogers does. He decided to take his patrol car to the first house that was supposed to have their lifeline of water shut off by the government. And he parked it there. He said, you come into this house, I'm handcuffing you, and I'm sending your butt to jail. That's the type of character that we need in law enforcement. That's the type of character that is in law enforcement. When we have groups like the Oath Keepers and others who are willing to protect our rights, we've got to be willing to stand with them. So when we tell stories of police abuse, federal agency abuse, we've got to tell the good ones too. Because sometimes, and I'm guilty of it too, sometimes you do 3 or 4 days where you're talking about, oh man, can you believe what this guy did? Can you believe what that guy did? Can you believe what that guy did? And you know what? The good guys who are listening go, not all of us. They start to feel frustrated and alone, but they're not. A Maryland Democrat recently said if 10 rounds isn't enough for you, you're not good enough to have 30. Interesting. Because there was a study done on law enforcement and the ability to hit a target. Because we're told that only they can have the aggressively styled hunting rifles, right? Because they're trained. Most of us served in the military and are just as trained or better trained, but they're trained. The average hit rate in good conditions in law enforcement is only 30%, according to a study of California and New York State law enforcement. In bad conditions, it's 9%. Imagine what it would be with a citizen who doesn't face that every single day, who wasn't in the military, wasn't in law enforcement like many of us here. But they got a bad guy coming at them. And they miss, just like the well-trained guys with badges and uniforms do. A couple months ago, 27 people attacked 3 men outside of a Celtics game. One of those guys was armed. You think a 10-round magazine is going to make a bit of difference? No. The Korean shopkeepers in the LA riots who used AK-47s and AR-15s to defend their shops against hordes of rioters. Think a 10-round magazine was going to help them? The man who stood on his roof as rioters were trying to get to him with his assault rifle, aggressively styled hunting rifle, and held them off. You think a 10-round magazine is going to be good enough for that man? No. And the FBI says you're only going to fire 2.5 shots per engagement anyway, so what's a 10-round magazine limit going to do against the bad guy? Anybody familiar with Sheriff Campbell in Boone County? Posted a 14-minute video. Because, magazine capacity is all about saving children. He posted a 14-minute video where he took several different weapons in several different magazine capacities, and he had a well-trained shooter and an average female shooter. Not well-trained, she knew what she was doing, had some range time, but she wasn't a professional. Let's go ahead and try these magazines and change them out. Let's see how fast we can be if we were to jump some guys going into a school and trying to shoot our children. Average reload time is 1.5 to 2.5 seconds. That's it for her. The professional got faster with 10-round magazines than he was with 30-round magazines. Not enough time. Myth busted. But that's what they're going to continue to tell you. And you know what? As I'm probably running a little bit late on my time, but my ancestors had to deal with this from Luxembourg. And they're also from Russia. Russia used to be the most heavily armed society on Earth. They had this guy, kind of goofy looking at a weird mustache. His name was Lenin. There's a statue of him in honor in Seattle, by the way. One man with a gun can control 100 without one. That's Lenin. A system of licensing and registration is the perfect device to deny gun ownership to the middle class. That's Lenin. You know the Canada got rid of their gun registration because it didn't work, it didn't solve one crime? Because it doesn't. I'm considered a radical even by Second Amendment people on this sometimes. Anybody familiar with Tench Cox?
Yes.
Tench Cox, the representative to the Continental Congress. Now, we all know from reading the Federalist Papers that the militia is you and I. The Indiana Constitution says that everybody here over the age of 17 is a part of the militia of the state anyway. This is Tench Cox. Who are the militia? Are they not ourselves? Is it feared then that we shall turn our arms each man against his own bosom? Congress have no power to disarm the militia. Their swords and every other terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American. The unlimited power of the sword is not in the hands of either the federal or state governments, but where I trust in God, it will ever remain in the hands of the people of the United States of America. Yeah, I think we should have RPGs. Tench Cox thinks we should have RPGs. George Washington thought we should have RPGs. I know not everybody agrees with me on this, but I'm going to give you a quote from Washington. A free people ought not only be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. Ron Teachman, the chief of police for South Bend, President of the United States, the Vice President, which is giving dangerous and flat-out illegal gun advice to everybody about shotguns. They sound a heck of a lot more like Lenin. I'm willing to bet most of you here sound a lot more like George Washington and Tench Cox. I want to thank you for inviting me, Tricia. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for what you're doing.